Greetings, happy coders. Welcome to another video. Today we are going back in time just a little bit to earlier versions of AGDx, which I know some of you are still using. And one of the big differences in the newer versions of AGDx is the data option. If you look at this version here, which is IA, you can see ABC. There is no letter D. But if we swing over to this version, you'll see we've got this option here called data. Now, what is the purpose of data? Well, it serves a number of different functions, but primarily it is there to allow you to move your game from one version to the next. So I've been working on various different add-ons, different things to add to the engine, such as sprite mirroring, masking, AY music integrated, and several others. And once you add them, it changes the position of the engine in the memory, and of course it changes the position of the data, which makes it difficult to transfer a game from one version to another. And that's the reason why so many different versions of AGD were not compatible with each other. So to overcome this problem, I developed this data system, and that saves all of the game data and allows you to move it from one version to another. And I can tell you that this has been absolutely indispensable for me in terms of testing, because it means that I can change the engine but still use the same game that I've been working on, or the demo that I've been working on, within a different engine, so that I can test the code, make changes, fix bugs, do all of those kind of coding things without having to constantly update and make it compatible. So that's why the data thing is there. Initially it was there for me as a debug tool, but obviously now with the developments I've been making with AGDx Plus, where you'll be able to choose which features of the engine you want, then you'll be able to take your game and load it in to AGDx Plus. So as you can see here, these are the options that you have. I'll just tell you a little bit more about these. Some of these are in progress. So these first four here are all to do with exporting game data. So that data is for the full game. You can save it to a binary, which means moving it over to another machine, potentially, possibly to the Spectrum Next in the future, but no promises on that, but that could happen. And we've also got a tap loading system here, which will allow us to save all of the game in a format that can then be loaded into a new engine. These three down here are all different. This one is for exporting to RS-232. That will actually export your sprite data in a format that can be used in assembly. It's not something that many of you will use, but it will output the sprite data as comma delimited text that you can paste into Notepad. And this one, bipolar convert, will allow you to import tunes from bipolar to put in-game beeper music. And the extra storage one here is a system that will allow you to use the contended memory. So currently, as we know from here, the font is the first thing, the lowest down thing in the memory in AGD, and it starts at 31232, just there. And that is actually in non-contended memory. The Spectrum has two different types of memory. Memory that's above 32K is what we call non-contended. And this memory is not shared with the ULA chip. So it's used only by the Z80 chip. And that means that it is faster because it's not getting asked to do things by the other chip. It's dedicated to only the one chip rather than the video control. So any data that goes below 32K, 32,000, is going to be a little bit slower. I think it's about 20% slower. So you generally try to avoid putting in-game code in that area because it will run slower in-game. And most of AGD, in fact all of AGD, is held above 32,000, apart from this font, which obviously when you're printing text you don't need to print as quickly, and that 20% drop in speed is not going to be noticeable, because when you're printing text, generally it's something that the user will be reading, so it's not going to be going to the screen as quickly as you would need it to if you were using sprites. So yeah, basically the extra storage will make the rest of the contended memory available. The memory below 32,000, there's about 6K available. It's not suitable really to be used for sprites because, as I said, it's not going to be quick enough. You're going to have slowdown. But it can be used for other things like certain graphics, certain parts of a level, perhaps some text messages. There are a few other things that I'm planning. So what I've done is I've made it possible to save that memory and load it in as the standalone game, and then I'll be adding some kind of mods which make use of that, which you'll then be able to put into your games. So that's how that works. And when that is set up, there'll be another video on that. Right now, our main focus then is on this data format here. And it works in a very simple way. When you have a game loaded in, you basically would go to press D, you'd press tap save, and save a tap off like that. And I'll give you a demo of it. But before I do that, we'll move back to the old version and show you how we bring in code from a previous version into an updated version like this. So this is the earlier version, and most of you will be familiar with using the binary load system to update to the next version of AGDx. Now, with these changes, I was only changing the AGDx editor and I wasn't changing the engine, which is why it was easy to do this binary load, because it was only loading in the game and the game engine. So what we would do with a system like that is we would go to the character editor, and then we would save a binary at 31232 at approximately 34,000 bytes. And most of you will be familiar with this method, and I have made a video on that before. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to load in an old game, that is Terrapins here, 31232, just to show you that that works. There you go, and there is the game running, and everything is as it was, but of course this is still the version that doesn't have the data option. So how do we move from a version that doesn't have the data option to a version that does? Well, again, it's pretty straightforward. We can use the binary option, we can move it over, and then once it's in, we'll then save a data to a tap, and then we'll reboot the engine because some of it will have been overwritten, and then we'll load the game data back in, and then we'll have the game data in the fresh engine. So the number to look for here is next to the sprites, 36944. This number here tells you where the game data starts, and so in order to be compatible, we need to make sure that our game data in the new version also starts at that point. So we need to use a kind of vanilla version of AGDx Plus that doesn't have anything added and is basically a replica of the original AGD engine with a few minor changes, and that will be almost compatible with our game. Certainly it will get us to the point where we can use it to then save a tap and then load it in, and from there on it's going to be a piece of cake. So let's look at how we do that. Okay, so here we are in 4PA. This is not a public release yet. This is available to Patreon supporters. So quick plug there, that is patreon.com/happycodingzx. If you are interested in this and you would like to take part in the development and contribute and help, then of course you'll be very welcome, and please go to the page and sign up, and you'll receive beta versions and tech support and so on, all that kind of good stuff, as well as all of the games that I create you will get for free as well. Okay, so moving on, here we go. This is the vanilla version, and as I said, the way to spot that is look at the number here, 36944. Now, if you have a version of AGDx from the past that lets you adjust the pointers, and you've used it to add some code, for example, to add beeper music and things like this, I have done videos about that. That was a method that was possible, and you could change the pointers. So if you want to load a game in where you've changed those pointers, then you will need to go to the menu, switch on the pointer here, and make the same change to the pointer that you made in your game, and then that will make it compatible. I don't think there are many of you that have actually done that, so for most of you, you've got this number 36944 here, and that's fine. And incidentally, that's exactly the same for any version of AGD 4.7, including the original one by Jonathan, which of course is completely untouched by me. So you can load any version of AGDx or AGD 4.7 into this version here, as long as you've got this number here, 36944. All right. Now, the next thing that we do then is we're going to go to the binary menu and do the same load-in system that we did before. And we'll load the tap in. Sorry, we'll load the binary in. The tap's coming later. Okay, now watch this, because you might see a little flash here of the game. Right? Now, the reason that happened is because this engine, as we know, is not 100% compatible. And if we run the game now, it will crash. However, we can use the data option here to save a tap. So I'll show you how to do that. We'll go to the media here, we'll go to tape. Just a second, I'll just move up the menu so that you can see. And we'll clear the tape. Then we go to data and we press S to save a tap. And then we go to tape write. And let's overwrite this one here, Terrapin's tap. We'll overwrite that one. Save it here. Okay, and now we've got a fully compatible version which we can load into the engine. So the next thing we'll do then is we'll now reset and load the AGD engine back so that it's clear and it doesn't have the binary data that we've loaded in. Okay, so here we are back with a completely empty version again without any binary data. Now, bear in mind, once you've done this, once you've got your game into a version with this data option, then the whole process is miles easier, because all you have to do is you just go data like this, save a tap, write it to the file, and then load it in again back with a different engine. So it is super simple, and as I said, it's been really helpful for me. But with the older versions, you have to do this binary process, but once you've done it, it only takes 5 minutes. Then you save it, and from then on your game data is fine and compatible with future versions as well. So we've made a tap, so now let's load that tap in. So you go to data, then we'll choose media, and we'll go to the tape here. Just a second, we'll go to the tape, and we'll open that tap that we made there, and we will then just press L. You get a little flash. If it's not compatible, it will tell you, but it seems to have loaded fine. Obviously, there are some compatibility issues. You can't load a mini game, AGD Mini, into a regular, for example. And some of the issues with the newer FX system also need to be ironed out, but I'm working on those. Okay, so we've now got, as you can see, we've got the full game. There are the sprites there. There are the blocks, and everything is kind of in place and running. However, this particular game will still crash, but that's because I am using some assembly code in here, and that is calling addresses which have now been moved or maybe slightly different than before, and for that reason the game still won't run. So for most of you this won't be an issue, but if you do have assembly calls, then you will need to take them out. So that would be the next thing that I would do here, for example, and I would go through the code. This is quite a long script, so just bear with me here. One of the things I like to do if I'm going through the scripts quickly is speed up the emulation speed. That makes quite a big difference. but we'll leave it for now. We're just going to get to the point down here, I think, where there'll be some assembly code, perhaps. I think, if memory serves me, there will be something in here somewhere. If it's not in here, well, there you go. There it is. So this is actually to do with the high score table. Well, I say high score table, it's just one high score. And we need to remove these calls here. And the reason for that is that we have a high score routine in the stored in the character set, which is here. This data here, it's a high score routine, which is called. But if the engine has moved slightly, then you're going to be putting values into addresses where they don't belong, and just one value in the wrong place can cause the whole thing to crash. So in order to do the compatibility, you'll need to take out any assembly language calls that you have and then redo them. Presumably, if you know how to make assembly calls, you'll also know how to redo them. But again, for most of you, that's not going to be an issue. So let's now switch over to show you an updated version of the engine, which has AY music added. So what will happen is that the AGDx Plus versions, there'll be options online for you to download a version of AGDx with whichever patches that you want to include. So you'll be able to add the masking or add the AY music or the various other effects that I've showcased, and that will give you a custom engine specific for your game. And the reason that's so useful, of course, is that it means that rather than have a single engine, we can reduce the things that we don't need and add the things that we do, so that we maximize the use of the memory. And that will, of course, allow us to make bigger and hopefully better games. So I'm going to switch over now to the version that supports the AY. The AY engine uses, I think, roughly 200 bytes. So if you have a game which has less than 200 bytes available in the vanilla version, then you will have to think about how you can save a bit of memory. Perhaps you can delete a couple of blocks or remove a bit of text or figure something out, but you're going to have to save a little bit of memory somewhere to do it. There are a few little things you can do. And alternatively, you could just delete something, then load the AY, and then plan ahead as to what you want to do there. But I know that for most of you, your games are probably only halfway finished, and so you haven't got to that point yet. And there aren't that many games that have such a low use of memory there anyway. We've got plenty to play with here at this point, certainly. So let's switch over to a new version of the engine, which is slightly bigger and includes the option to add AY music. Okay, so here we are in an updated version, which has the AY tunes option loaded. As you can see, this number has changed because we've used up a little bit more memory to add the AY control. So it's used about 160 bytes of additional memory. Most of the AY player is held in the bank where the tunes are stored, so it doesn't use up a lot of memory, but obviously if your game has less than 150, 160 bytes available before you make the upgrade, then you're going to have to find a way to cut that back before you can add the AY tunes. But it's a fairly small amount of memory, and most of you, I imagine, won't have that kind of restriction. Okay, so we've got this in here now. We've got the data option available, so we can just, this is how easy it is to load a game in now. You just go to the data, you go to media, and you tape, and there is the tap file that we've created there, and we'll open it and press L, and it is loaded. And this has loaded the game data, so we don't have to worry about the engine. The engine is now the new one, but the game is still the same one as before. So you can see the game is here and it's all fine and it's working. So let's just run it and make sure it's fine. There we go. Game is running, into the game and out again. So there you go. Everything is all hunky-dory. So let's add a tune just to show you that that works as well. So all we need to do now, we go to AY tunes here, free memory, and we will load a binary in like this. And I know that I've got David's tune here on standby to use. So we'll load that in at this address. I have made a video on doing this, so this is something you'd find out on another video. Brings that in there and we can test it. There we go. And if we want to add music to, say, the game here as it starts, we would just put music 1 in like that. Start the game. So there you go. Now, a couple of things to say about this. The AY tunes, when you save the data file, the AY tunes are not saved as part of that. So you'd have to do that separately. It's not ideal, I know, but I just haven't got around to doing that yet. And for the most part, the data format is used for upgrading to new versions. And if you have to bring in AY tunes, it doesn't take that long, does it really? So it's probably not such a big deal to load them in, to have to load them in separately if you're upgrading. For the most part, it's a pretty straightforward process and easy to transfer. And this is the format, this is the way from now on that if you do decide to upgrade to a newer version of AGDx, let's say, then you'll use this data format to move your game from one version to the next so that you can try out different features and different engines. It is still fully backwards compatible. Well, it's just that there's an extra step in the process which I've now shown here. But in the future, if you're developing on this version and you want to upgrade to another one, you'll just need to use the data option, save it as a tap, and then go back to the new version and load it in. And it'll take a matter of seconds to do that. And it's, if anything, it's easier than the binary option. I hope you'll agree. Another thing, by the way, is that if you do have a game where you've caused a crash or a bug or something like that, sometimes you can save it off as data, load it in, and it will actually work because the engine can get corrupted sometimes by some of the previous code that was there. So it can actually clean up a game sometimes as well. So that's quite handy. Okay, so I guess that's it for today. I do have quite a few more videos planned showing some of the new features. As I said, the plan is for AGDx Plus to be available to everybody for free, ultimately, but for the time being, I'm still working on it, and so it's available for people on Patreon. So if you're interested, as I said, there'll be a link. You can follow that. The reason is that the engine, the features on the engine are, they're working more or less, but getting them to all work together is the tricky part. So I'm trying to minimize that before I put it out there. But as I said, if you really do want to have a look at them, then you're more than welcome to support me on Patreon. And I look forward to hearing from you on there, perhaps. Okay, great. So thanks a lot. I'll see you again in another video soon. And in the meantime, as always, happy coding. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. This video would not be possible without the amazing contributions from the people whose names you can see scrolling up the screen right now. If you'd like to be one of them, you can get all my games for free. You can get some coding tips. You can even get to dictate which games I work on in the future, and you might even feature in them. So if that sounds good to you, then head over to the Patreon page. The link is just coming up now. And in the meantime, happy coding. Bye bye.